When I was a young piano student, my mom's encouragement, her downright insistence, was the only way that my piano playing skills improved. Now fast forward several decades and I'm still practicing, but not the piano. When I learn about a new sewing technique, I practice on a sample or two. Thinking you're much like me, this current series, Applique Know-How, is designed for you to practice applique techniques. Satin Stitch Switch Up is the first version in the second program of my three-part series. Notice the varying width of the stitch. A little creativity can go a long way. Applique Know-How, that's what's coming up next on Sewing with Nancy.
Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, a complete line of sewing, quilting, and embroidery machines and sergers. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Madeira, specializing in embroidery, quilting, and special effect threads, because creativity is never black and white. Koala Sewing Cabinets, hand-built in the USA by American craftsmen, customized for you. Clover, makers of sewing, knitting, quilting, and embroidery products for over 25 years. Experience the Clover difference. Amazing designs and Class A needles.
I'd like to do a quick review of working with a satin stitch and applique. Remember, this is a workbook, a process type of program where you're just going to practice on a sample. And we have found that working with a heart shape that can either become a heart or a leaf shape later on and some rectangles, you can practice all basic applique and stitching techniques on these shapes. Now, as a review, when working with an applique, most of the time I just work with a paper-backed fusible web. It has a web on one side and a paper on the other. And your applique is traced onto the paper side, and you trim off, leaving about a half of an inch to a fourth of an inch extra fabric. And then you press this onto the wrong side of the fabric. And many times you'll be making multiple appliques, not just one at a time, but you'll be pressing multiple ones. I like to give it a little steam. And then after pressing, you cut along the dotted line and peel off the paper backing. Now, sometimes that paper backing is really the trickiest part to get off. If you can't get it started, then just use a pin and score the paper, and you can tear it off. And this technique works very well if you just have a basic applique where you don't have any inner markings placed on this paper, which we used in the first program. Then after cutting out all your applique shapes, and for this practice run, you'd fuse them down. But just one more thing I'd like to show you. On this light fabric, we backed it with fusible interfacing before putting the web down, because we had show through. You could see different colors, like the peach would come through this yellow. So those are just some of the basics that I'd like to review right now and have reviewed. And then the final is to fuse down. And this makes, of course, applique so much easier than trying to just cut fabric without any stability on the underside and do the stitching. Now, during the first program of this series, I just reviewed the very basic core principles of stitching, turning corners, inside corner, outside corners, working with points. What I'm going to incorporate into this program to start off with is to change the stitch width, and some hints on as you're stitching to get the stitch wider, to get it narrower, so that you have an even distribution of stitches. Make certain that you're going to be working with a presser foot that is designed for embroidery or decorative stitches. The key element is on the underside of the stitch, underside of the foot, is a hollowed out section so that the satin stitches can glide over this area with ease. I'd like to use an open toe foot. This is just my preference. It's easier for me to see what is stitching. Using rayon thread that just rolled away. Here's some rayon thread and an embroidery needle, either titanium or just traditional embroidery needle, longer eye needle. The reason for this is it's longer eyed and it works with this embroidery thread. Loosen the tension is what we're going to do first. I've chosen a zigzag stitch, and you're loosening the tension to about a 3.0, excuse me, 2.8, somewhere in that range. And I have a zigzag stitch selected. And the width, we're going to start with a traditional width for satin stitch is 2.5 and length very short. Do a test run, very short length, and I have this about 0.5, 0.6, somewhere in that vicinity. On my fabric, I have a stabilizer underneath. And then I'm just going to lower the presser foot. The stabilizer can be torn away after it's over. And then just satin stitch, stitching with a zig in the fabric, zag just off the edge of the applique. Now if you want to change the width, I have it set at 2.5, and as I'm sewing, I'm going to slightly increase it at periodic intervals. And let me just turn the corner. I think that will work out a little bit better. And then as I sew, I'm just going to start on a longer edge. And you can see as you're doing the basic stitching, you've done this before, I'm sure, but now to increase, I'm going to increase a number and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, increase another number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, increase another number, just kind of set your own kind of pace to get the wider widths so that you can vary it. When you're turning outside corners, stop with the needle in the right side and pivot, and then give it a little nudge so that it goes over the bump and stitch 5 or 6 stitches. Shorten the stitch length a little bit, stitch 5 or 6 stitches, push, sew, push, sew, push, sew, and I'm keeping on doing this so that it varies and gets smaller. Now, let me just cut the threads, lift this up to show you, and show you also the finished sample. It doesn't work so good always to talk and sew, but you can see how it varies. I did the same thing around the curve, just kind of as you're sewing, just gently push the button and it changes the width for our applique know-how technique. Thread takes a back seat to this applique know-how technique, appropriately named Yarning for Attention. There are just a few know-how guidelines to learn, and then soon you'll be able to add artistic touches to appliques with novelty yarns. The type of yarns that I used for this sample applique are chenille and also blue clay yarns, and you can use a variety of them. In the workbook that accompanies this program, I'm going to give you all these settings, or you can jot them down because we're going to make some changes. The first change is the thread. Monofilament clear thread is the choice in the needle. In the bobbin, just use all-purpose or the bobbin fill thread, whatever you'd like to work with. In the needle, make sure that you work with an embroidery needle a size 75 or 80. It has a longer eye for the novelty threads, such as the monofilament. Now, initially in this first program, I showed you how if you had inner details of a design, to mark them on the paperback fusible web, remove the paper, which this has removed, and then when you match it back to your fabric, you flip it over, then you can stitch through the paper and get the designs transferred using a straight stitch. Obviously, I've already stitched that on another piece of paper and I've removed it. And then you can know where to put the yarn. So you can do those inner details for couching first rather than last. So the stitch is a zigzag, and the width is about 3.5, a little bit wider than a traditional satin stitch, and the length about 1.5. But test it on a scrap with your yarn, with your edge, because if you have thick yarn, you may even want it wider than 3.5. Now, in starting to couch or zigzag over the yarn, that's the term couch, I'm going to give myself a tail to hold on to. I'll trim that off later on, and I'm going to start at the background design first and then just zigzag over the edge. Now, traditionally when doing satin stitching, at an outside corner you'd stop with the needle in the right position. You do the opposite for this particular technique. Stop with the needle in the opposite position, one more stitch, there we go. And the reason for this, as you turn the corner, the yarn wraps around the needle. If you stopped with the needle in the right position at corners, you would have rounded corners rather than a corner. So again, we're just going to work with stopping with the needle this time in the left position and wrap it. So it's the opposite of what you'd think for turning corners. I'm not going to do all of this for you right now. I'll just do this section, and if you need to have your stitching close to your finger, rather than stitching your finger, perhaps you may want to have a stiletto there to help. And then, assuming that I would have finished stitching this regularly, I would catch that with the next stitch, but let me just show you this next yarn. Now, because this yarn is loftier, And I'm going to start now to do both the inner details. Got to decide where I'm going to start. Here we go. The inner details and the outer details at once. We're not going to have as much accuracy with this. It's more texture that we're after. So we just stitch over this. Because the applique has been fused down with the paperback fusible web, we are able to get a very smooth line, very artistic line, just guide it along. So you can see how you continue to do this. We'll take one more look at our finished sample, give this sample practice a try, and I think you'll enjoy yarning for attention. Attention all coffee fashionistas, now there's an applique stitch you can pair with your morning cup or 2 or 3 of coffee. Espresso applique looks like it was created after sipping 1 too many cups of coffee. Truth is, the look is created by a zigzag stitch at the free motion setting and can be enjoyed by non-coffee lovers too. This applique stitch around an edge has great versatility and has a little excitement built into it because, of course, it's not very standard. It looks artsy, it looks fun, and it really is a perfect way to test your hand at free motion stitching. When giving seminars, I ask how many people work with free motion quilting or free motion embroidery, and usually it's very few hands go up because people are afraid of changing the feed dogs, of not working with it, to guiding the fabric rather than the machine guiding it with you. I'll show you how you can start. It's with the espresso stitch for applique. We're going to start again with a zigzag stitch, and this time you can work with the zigzag stitch from 0.5 to 2 to 3. It really doesn't matter because you're going to be changing it somewhat, and you've got to make certain that you drop your feed dogs. Now on every machine the feed dog positioning is going to be different. So mine just happens to be on the screen. Yours could be a lever on your machine. Just drop those feed dogs and place an embroidery foot on your machine. Now the espresso stitch is moving the stitch back and forth, moving the fabric back and forth, just about 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 of an inch, while you're having the zigzag stitch. And you can get this very interesting look by doing this guiding. We have a little thread tail there I forgot to clip. On our sample, I use matching thread to each applique color. But here, we just are guiding it. It gives you a feel of not having the feed dogs engaged. But the work does not have to look exacting. You can see that I'm just moving it with my left hand. You can use your right hand just back and forth. If you didn't move it, it would be a satin stitch that you would have to guide. Let me show you that satin stitch. But I like doing it this way. Looks like a terrible EKG pattern right now, but I like doing it this way so that you can have this little artsy effect. You can turn corners with creativity. You certainly don't have to have any certain pivoting point. So for those of you who would like to work, whoa, there we go. It had 1 too many cups of coffee there, so just keep on moving it. Then it might give you the feeling of free motion stitching. So let's take one more look at our espresso applique stitch, wider stitch or narrower stitch. It's a very artsy application. Clustered fabric scraps and straight stitches are the new elements that combine to create the next unique technique, confetti applique. You'll be surprised how the smallest scrap of fabric can be incorporated into an innovative applique. Here you can see another close-up of this combination. Instead of a solid applique, obviously the confetti, followed with the stitching that we've worked with throughout this program. But getting the confetti down is what I'd like to feature first. You're going to cut out a shape of your applique using the paperback fusible web and then fuse it directly to the fabric, not to fabric applique, but to the base fabric. Then before removing the paper backing, do a little tracing, giving yourself some guidelines of where the outline shape is going to be. Now for the confetti applique, you really have to use a design that is not intricate, that is just general in shape. And then remove the paper backing and now create the confetti. Sometimes we call this fabric pizza. You can slice and dice various little strips of fabric Good way to get some frustrations out. Just a little bit will go a long way, and you've made some confetti. And then after making the confetti, you sprinkle it on top of your shape, trying to keep the confetti sections within the outline. Now you can see it's losing its shape very soon, but we'll get it back in just a few minutes. Kind of put it together again, then use a Teflon pressing sheet. This is really important so that in case there isn't an area covered with the confetti, that your bottom of your iron does not get the fusible web applied to it. And maybe you've done that before. I certainly have. So we peel this off, and then you may have to dust off a few sections because maybe you had too much of the confetti. Looks like everything held down quite well. Now cover the area with a water-soluble stabilizer. And you're going to pin this onto the fabric. And this is going to hold it down while I do the stitching. And you might want to, at this point, if you need to, just retrace wherever you had that leaf. I can't see my markings very well, so I'm going to retrace those. And so I know where they will be in a few minutes. And now I can just take this to my sewing machine and do the rest of the confetti applique technique. All of the techniques in this series on applique know-how are very simple. And the next steps for the confetti applique follow suit. After we have the appliques positioned, we have covered with a water-soluble stabilizer on top, kind of pinned in place. The machine is now set for a straight stitch, a standard setting, no changes of tension or stitch length. And now just stitch across. And then as you get to one of the markings, you could even stitch a stitch or two beyond if you wanted to, because this is, again, kind of an artsy thing, and move, then reverse. And you can kind of then just keep pushing forward and back. And if you didn't want to do the reverse, you could pivot it. The choice would be yours. Just fill in, just stitching a stitch or two beyond, making the stitch fill in. It's as simple as that, and it is kind of fun just to keep moving. I kind of switch up, do a combination of straight stitch, reverse. I have my hand on the top of the machine just depressing the reverse button, and fill in. It's kind of no-brainer sewing. People often ask me, is it difficult to teach kids to sew? Not if you have fun techniques such as this. This is an ideal children's technique. They could run the machine just as fast as they'd like, just as I'm doing here, and just filling it in. And perhaps, I kind of overshot it more than I should have that time, but we'll just keep going this way and just fill in all of the areas. I'm using my knee lift on my machine to raise the presser foot. It makes it a lot easier and faster. So if you have it, incorporate that. So I'm doing kind of a poor job of filling in, but you get the idea. After you've filled in the entire area, then you can do the satin stitch. Now right now with the chalk, I've kind of obviously taken off some of the outline stitches, so I could re-stitch along the outline, or what I'm just going to do, just to give myself a satin stitching area, I'm just going to stitch following the paper. And the paper was what I pulled off of the web after I fused it to the yellow fabric. So just stitch around the edge. As you can see, there are several techniques that you can use to incorporate in this various sewing technique, and then just add the inner details. And I kind of didn't make that exactly accurate, but you get the idea. You stitch along the paper and then remove the paper because the needle will perforate it. And for this one, I'm just going to do a couple of the inner details. And as I stitch along this edge, then I can just remove the paper. Now, set your machine for a satin stitch. And after satin stitching the edges using the technique we've done over and over again throughout this series, stitching along the edges, stitching in the inner details, then immerse the fabric into water to remove the water soluble, and your confetti applique is complete. The terms recycling and makeovers are not strangers to Sewing with Nancy viewers, but we have also found that these topics have spread into the educational system. People who are working with apparel and fashion are thinking just like us, recycling and also to make over. And to share information how that's becoming a worldwide venture, I'd like to introduce you to Sandy Kaiser, Department Chair of the Fashion Department at Mount Mary College in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Sandy, you work with individuals who are very creative, but you're encouraging sustainable fashion.
Well, sustainability and corporate responsibility really are carried across the curriculum. They're things we try to cover in a variety of classes, from textiles to apparel industry seminar, where we're talking about corporate values and strategic planning.
When it comes to fabric, it's the paradigm has certainly changed and shifted.
We really feel that we need to think of a sustainable menu of fabrics. If we think organic cotton is the only thing that is sustainable, that won't be. So we need to think about hemp and silk, and there are new things they're doing
Bamboo.
with wools and in terms of the processing that is not as cruel to the animal. Bamboo, yes.
You have given me a stack of fabrics that are all sustainable. They're all organic, and even bamboo fabric has a hand and a feel as silk.
That one happens to be a hemp and silk blend, and it does. One of our students bought these samples so that she could use organic fibers in her collection, and the dress really looks like silk.
And it does, as our viewers can see a snapshot of this, it has the glisten and shine of silk, but that's maybe not as creative. I mean, it's very beautiful, but it's not as creative as some of your other students working with recycling and sustainability.
Today, as students get interested in this, and really across the fashion spectrum, we also try to be a little bit political in challenging people to recycle. And so if you look at Sarah's dress, the bodice is made totally from recycled bottle caps.
It's very clever, and it certainly goes with the recycled bottle caps, and the bodice certainly fits with that fun skirt.
I think it's part of trying to make fashion a little bit more serious, and it's often been thought of as somewhat frivolous. And today we really want to show that it's an intellectual process as well.
Now, we've used recycled ties on Sewing with Nancy, but I don't think I've ever made anything totally out of ties.
That dress is Katie's, and it was done in an advanced pattern construction class. She used the ties but did a beautiful job fitting that strapless bodice and letting the ties out into the beautiful flare of the skirt.
Now, shredded cotton, that is a fashion statement in itself.
There is a lot of interest in recycling cotton. Emily took some cotton that she did buy, it's new cotton, but she shredded it by cutting in and sort of letting the runs happen until it really made a solid new pattern. And that particular garment won an award in our recent fashion show.
But there are places to recycle t-shirts and other cottons.
Well, there's a very interesting company that was founded by Natalie Channon, and it's now called Alabama Channon. Some of your viewers may know it as Project Alabama. And they really started their business with recycled t-shirts, layering them, and doing sort of a reverse applique, stitching around with very big stitches, and then cutting through to the second layer and to beautiful effect.
And the person that our viewers just saw was Natalie Channon.
Yes, she is very free, because if we believe in sustainability, you have to share your ideas. So she goes around and often does workshops. I had the ability to take this workshop with her and now can share that technique with our students.
And then one quick other one, just to show a vintage blanket.
Well, a lot of our students enjoy getting fabrics from vintage stores, and Lauren took a vintage blanket, used the motif of the blanket to applique on the back of her tailored coat.
How fitting for today's program.
So the students are very innovative and they're very interested in this.
Well, it's exciting to learn what students are doing in addition to what we can do as sewers and to incorporate some of these fabrics and concepts. Sandy, thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you for being with us on Sewing with Nancy. You can always go to sewingwithnancy.com, click on Nancy's Corner to find out more information about this. Well, next time we'll be back with our third and final program of Applique Know-How, and you're going to get even more ideas. Thanks for joining us, and bye for now.
Nancy's fully illustrated Applique Know-How workbook includes laminated instructions for all the techniques featured in this 3-part series. It's $19.99 plus shipping and handling. To order the book, call 800-336-8373 or visit our website at sewingwithnancy.com/2314. Order item number BK2314, Applique Know-How. Credit card orders only. To pay by check or money order, call the number on the screen for details. Visit Nancy's website at sewingwithnancy.com for more information on this program. Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, Madeira Threads, Koala Cabinets, Clover, Amazing Designs, and Classe Needles. Closed captioning funding provided by Rowenta. Sewing with Nancy is a co-production of Nancy Zieman